What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with our final update on the hunt for Skarbrand. I really aggressively laddered this season to kind of see how high I could get and to see if I could actually get that top 6% reward card, Skarbrand. So did I do it? As you can see, my trophy count is sitting at 14479, which is an all-time record for me. Very proud of that. And a little bit higher than it was the last time I recorded a video, but nowhere near as much higher as the previous ones. So I'm going to run through, look at my current faction standing. I'm going to look at the leaderboard, I'm going to look at the reward stack, talk very briefly about the decks that got me here, and then leave it at that. So we'll see. So 14479. This is the faction breakdown I ended up with. I actually was pretty shocked. I did get Lilith unleashed. So at the end of the season to do this, I actually ended up playing 3K, 3,000 trophies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what is that? 7 of the 9 factions. So almost every single faction in the game, I was able to get over 3,000 trophies, which is pretty cool by itself. And given the time, Space Marines and Votann probably could have gotten up there as well. But once you hit that 3K mark, your matches get just dramatically more challenging. And so when I got here and got my Eldari down to my 5th and not my top 4, I played a couple games and I hit such a nasty losing streak. I immediately jumped from like 3,500 to 2,900 trophies. It was nuts. It was like a 600 trophy losing streak, which is just awful. And as you can see, I've been able to claw it back, but most of the entire week was trying to claw Eldari and to a lesser extent Tau into where they were competing with the other factions. And this is week 4. This is where I'd expect to get the most challenging matches because the decks I'd be up against are the ones that are appropriately pointed, or they're appropriately rated in the like 3K trophy range. So I'm hitting decks that are higher trophies, and those are decks that belong at that higher trophy count. So they're very scary decks. Seen a lot of that, and so I was pretty happy about this. My warlords did change a little bit, so obviously Lilith was not able to get me back up. I tried every single one of the Eldari warlords, and I couldn't get any of them to actually get traction, which was very surprising. Really biffed it with the avatar. Lilith is the one I used to climb back to where I am now. Totally tanked with Eldrad, and did incredibly badly with Rakarth, which I was also surprised by, because Rakarth is one of the more challenging warlords in the ladder. So I'm not sure what I was doing wrong there, if just the decks I was running aren't great against Rakarth. But for Orcs, it still was Snickrot, was still kind of the better one. Badruk is up there too, and then Zagstruck, or the Zodgrod Wartsnaga. Wartsnaga? I think his name is Zodgrod, yeah. The one who gives you a bonus to your attack stats based on your sub 10 point or less cards dying. Tau, I did actually a little bit of melee Farsight, which was a lot of fun. But Onva and Darkstrider and Shaz-O were all roughly even around this area. So I can bump them maybe to 3.4K, but then they immediately bump down as soon as I try to actually hit this range here. So that was pretty cool to get up that high with those two, but I'm a little bit bummed I didn't do better. Like I said, Lilith was the top performer for me for Eldar. For Chaos, it was, again, that heavy Psyker, heavy poison Glogothrox. Glogothrox the Foul carried me through, just being the almost cheapest warlord and having that incredibly defensive trait to keep your power pieces alive. Absolutely massive. Once I leveled that up to get the Sonic Blast on the Poison Psyker, it's on. That deck will probably be the best deck I've ever had. So we'll see there. For Necrons, and so this is the crazy thing, Necrons were my lowest rated faction, hands down. I never play Necrons. And this was pretty much entirely playing with, no surprise, Drazen the Infinite. So for Tyranids, I was doing Gosar, but then I hit a point where the level of my Supreme Commander Gosar, where the level of my Supreme Commander Gosar held me back, where I wasn't able to keep climbing with him because he just couldn't close it out. He just didn't have the hit points. And so that was a bit of a shock, and I switched to the Parasite. A nicely balanced, very heavy-hitting Parasite of Mortrex deck really carried me up here, and I could still probably climb with all of these fairly comfortably, but I'm not touching it because I don't want to lose the trophies that I have already. Servants, I switched off of Vahl, non-Supreme Commander Vahl. I did a little bit of Supreme Commander Vahl and actually did fairly well, but then the one that really got me up here and was really powerful was Canoness. No surprise, good old Canoness carried me to the very top. So of this season, of this heavy competitive push, my most powerful warlord was the Canoness Viridian. And I'm going to look really, really quick at the decks I ran in that. This is Lilith, the one I'm playing right now. Very heavy on the ranged, but with the extra utility of the psychic secondary attack, Psionic Blast, and then I have Barrage on Mogan Ra. So I've got Precision Shot, Barrage. This does incredible amounts of damage very quickly. It does get bogged down by shields, fear, taunt, and then Rakarth, like I said, that heavy regen and fear just kind of was a wall that this couldn't get through, and really does have problems with Akaran. This has all the tools I need to take down Akaran's second lives, but most Akaran decks I hit with this one just had a lot of cards. So while I could deal with some of the second lives, I got to the end game and it was just Lilith against a Akaran with 4 shields, and you just couldn't punch through that. So that's where I was at. So, and what sucked is I was usually up against something that was pretty strong with a bodyguard and Akaran himself, and they were either good in melee or ranged. So I was either shooting with, say, this guy or hitting melee with Lilith, and whichever one I would do, I would take damage back, and it wasn't doing enough. So I wasn't doing melee twice or range twice. I was splitting my attack types there in the end game, which was a bummer. So I do think this may be a time to reconsider this and actually do take the more classic approach where I mix melee and ranged a little bit more aggressively. So we'll see about that one. So that was Lilith, and then moving on up the tree, we'll go ahead and just take a look at Zodgrad. And this is one where I tweaked quite a few decks. Really, one of the things that came down to is my this guy, the Mad Mangler. The orc decks that were the most frightening at any single level were the ones that had a very high level Mad Mangler. So we're talking like this range or somewhere in here. A Mad Mangler in that range is utterly terrifying and combos with every single orc warlord in a meaningful way. So just incredible card. All around probably the best card in the entire orc faction, and was one that I really missed in Snickrot and in Zodgrad, having just at the level 6 that I have. So still good, but not enough to get me through there. And then we looked at, you know what? Did I do this? I did try him. I actually had a couple wins fairly early on, just tinkering with decks with Necrons. And this one, very similar. That really, really powerful, high health, regen and or shields. Barrage Legendary really defines the faction. Like those Barrage, very powerful, expensive cards really carry the game. So this, I would argue, is probably the single best card in Necrons. And I have a decently high level one of this, but also, again, sitting at level 6, very similar to my other one. He was able to do a lot of work, particularly with Trazyn, to steal cards with both his primary target damage and then also his Barrage, and also just clean things up with that Barrage too. So he was the signature piece in all of my Necron decks and did very well. All of the decks did roughly the same because of him. But that was an interesting play to get up there. And then let's see. I can look at the Rakarth decks real quick. I believe I have decent cards in here, but they just never worked. So we'll just look at this real quick. Just kind of the 3 that I had latest that I saved from the different tries. So I have a Psychic Rakarth, Psychic and Poison. This one was okay, but I immediately hit like a Logan. Logan Grimnar is all over the upper tier, and he will absolutely punish you if you have weaker cards in the flanks, and use that to just beef right through your beefy cards as well. So it's very challenging to have cards with low hit points, because you get the Badruks, because you get the Logans, because you get the Calls. They really chew through your chaff cards extremely aggressively. So I didn't get much traction with any of the decks that relied on using those as meat shields, because they would just die. This is one that's all ranged, and then this is one that's just all kind of Drukhari. So I tried a couple of these and failed so miserably that I didn't go back to Rakarth. I did do a little Manifest Nightmare, but then Glogothrox. Actually, let's take a real quick look at my Tau before I get distracted. And I did tweak this a bit. So kind of lessons learned here. Like I was just saying, your chaff cards are an incredible liability. So if you have chaff cards in a deck, you better really, really want them for some reason. Wasn't that one? This one ended up being arguably my strongest deck with Shaz-O. This card, for just the bulk of hit points it has, benefits from the bonus damage from Shaz-O himself. Very, very powerful. The opposite thing for the chaff cards, these high to mid cost taunt cards are gold. At the upper tier competitive levels, even a low level one of these guys is absolutely huge for keeping your power cards alive. It will actually survive the turns it actually has taunt up, and will actually keep your stuff alive multiple turns. Huge. Yeah, but I tweaked this around quite a bit and played just a bunch of different things. I did find that Long Strike was really critical, but my Long Strike, again, is kind of in that level 6 legendary area, where he just doesn't have quite the stats I need to push through. And that was true for most of the factions where I underperformed, as I was leaning on some very powerful but lower level cards that just didn't cut it. Similarly with the Avatar, there we go. These are decently leveled cards. I've got a level 8 Solitaire. I've got a level 8 Janzar. I've got a level 9 Master of Drajar, whatever. Just have decent stuff in all of these and good high-level pieces, but I just wasn't able to get traction. I was either dying too quickly or not doing damage quickly enough to actually get through, and the deck was just too thin. I couldn't pull it off in a pure melee Avatar deck, which I was surprised by. The Avatar just recently got a points bump, and he's one of the scarier warlords kind of in the mid-tiers, so I expected him to perform well, and he did not. Okay, and then Gosar, I've looked at this one before, but this was a pretty cool one. My deck with Gosar is very much a cults deck with just a little bit of really hardcore dedicated Tyranids in it. And I don't want this part to be too long. I know I'm taking my time here. A couple things that make this really stand out is these two cards both are incredibly powerful out of the gate by themselves, and then as they start building up the basic attack buffs from deploying other endless cards, they stack up real quick, and they will just completely devastate boards. This guy here, if you can keep him in your hand, super powerful as well. And then this guy is a really funny one, just for he's sub 10 points, so you get a token of him, and the token also has that base 53 ranged attack, which will build up a lot if you're able to keep either the original or the token in your deck as you're deploying your other cards. So you'll have a 6-point card that's dropping easily 100 damage, which is a lot of fun. And then likewise, this barrage card again becomes completely insane. The huge downside to this deck, though, is that you don't get much control of your deploys. So I would prefer to have, instead of these two, have one really powerful piece. Ideally, all three of these become one supremely powerful barrage card, maybe one other one too, but to thin this deck down as much as possible so you have actual control of your deploys. Because there were too many cases where I'd have all three of these were my starting hand, and I had to play one of them before playing anything else, and I would just lose them before I was able to really get the utility out of them. So I would probably spread the points out here and try to go at least one card thinner, maybe 2 cards thinner, because you already have a thick deck because of your sub 10 point cards are just creating extra tokens to fill it up. So you can go with the thinner deck with this guy and still have a very deep bench. So yeah, I'm going to be looking at that. But again, it was Gosar's hit points that really held me back in this one. His hit points and then also his low level fear being just level 3 there. So absolutely incredible warlord. Enjoyed laddering him a lot, but he definitely fell behind the Parasite, who really kicked some butt. And the Parasite in particular, I run a fairly balanced deck, but it is pure melee. And the Parasite is one of the few warlords out there who, like Logan, has an ability to take punishing melee attacks and have them be splash attacks. So you can go through shields, you can go through multiple copies of things, you can take out Akaran extra lives with pure melee, which really is one of the things that gets melee kind of up into the upper tiers where it needs to be. Either your cards have to be so durable that they can hit more than they should, or they have to do damage to adjacent targets. That's really the key piece. So Deathblow is really good. Poison is good if you can rotate it around. Furious Charge or Precision Shot are good, or Furious Charge or Precision Shot or Target Acquired are all good to clear off lanes, so you can hit multiple targets if you want to. But of course, Death Leaper being an absolute gem, this guy having the incredible utility of both Berserk and Deathblow, plus a lot of hit points and a bunch of base melee. And then, of course, Old One Eye, one of my favorite lore characters, being phenomenal in this deck because he's got all the hit points, he's got Berserk, and he's got Endless. So he is a giant tar pit that takes so long to bring down and brings a lot of stuff with him. So these two really shore up the defense of the deck. These two are kind of mid-range and have different utility, and then this guy's just flanking and just murdering stuff in the corners, supported by our utility of Taunt, Medicae, and Target Acquired. This is a great deck. I've been really proud of this deck, and of course it's got 3 legendaries in it, but it's still really, really good, and those are somewhat older, attainable legendaries, hopefully. Let's see, what else? So, and then our next 2 factions, Glogothrox, we're looking at Chaos. And this guy was a stellar performer. This is one of my most consistent laddering decks. This is not that one. Glogothrox was a real surprise. When I built this out to be, yeah, there we go. And it's mostly the Lord of Change. Again, very similar to what I looked at before with the 2 Barrage cards and the other factions. The Lord of Change defines Chaos. He's the single most powerful card in the Chaos faction and works well in any of the Chaos Warlords, and is particularly strong if you have abilities that can keep him alive. So Glogothrox and Ahriman both are really strong at keeping him alive, both the chip healing and Glogothrox's ability. But Glogothrox is both cheaper and you can control his ability, so you have a lot more consistency game to game than you do with the randomness of Ahriman. So I've got a bunch of Taunt in here, I've got a bunch of Endless, I've got 2 Medicae, and then I've got 2 Poison Psychers as well. So the combination of Poison, a bunch of hit points, Psionic Blast, this was a super strong deck that really performed very well. I was impressed. So a Psychic Heavy Glogothrox with a bunch of Medicae, Poison, and Psionic Blast did the trick. Sure did. And then finally, it was our Servants of the Emperor. I will review a couple of the decks that I played here real quick. And the main one that I ran was non-Supreme Commander Morbin Vahl. And not that one. Except the one time I ran that by accident and was recorded doing it. This one is really very, very good. A bunch of taunt, bunch of Medicae, or excuse me, a bunch of taunt, a bunch of regen on this guy and this guy. Very strong ranged attack, and then has really strong poison in these 3 cards here. All in this have rank 3 poison. Very effective, really good at punching through like Fear, Shields, Akaran cards. Very, very good. Really struggles against the powerful heavy hitting decks. This can't deal with Tau. The poison is too slow. The range is not enough to overcome the Tau cards. The taunt cards aren't tough enough to survive it. This one got beat up really badly by Tau and Call. Call just cutting right through the defensive bonuses. Although Vahl's shield is one of the few things I saw that actually does reduce incoming damage beyond. So Vahl, actually both of Vahl's traits, I believe, is one of the few traits that will reduce Call's incoming damage below his supposed minimum, which may be an oversight, but is really nice. So again, Vahl herself and then Supreme Commander Vahl, both excellent defensive pieces, but they struggled on offense, which is why I ended up switching to Creed, who has the offense, really, really punchy offense, but does struggle with getting thinner decks. Let's see, which one? I didn't do that one. Because the thing is, his ability triggers off of your cards dying. And so as your cards die, you have less stuff to work with. Yeah, that was the one there, okay. A little bit of combination of taunt, target acquired, precision shot, endless. Endless is really good with Creed. If you have very powerful endless cards, very high health endless cards, that's a great way to trigger his ability without losing too much of your deck. And this one relied on just doing the damage, hitting stuff really hard, trying to get the kills more than actually triggering Creed's ability, but benefiting from Creed's ability when it triggered. Some of the scarier Creed decks I played against are shield heavy, because anytime a card redeploys with Creed, it gets all of its shields reset back, and Servants of the Emperor has a lot of shields. So Creed is really strong with Custodians, with Custodes bodyguards. So there is that. And then finally, the top scoring deck in my entire run was, of course, Servants. And that was this one, I believe, yes. Very scary. Learned a lot of lessons from the other decks I played. So I've got the 2 sort of middle range taunt in here, but they're both there. A lot of Furious Charge, Big Game Hunter, Endless, Medicae, Poison. The combination of Poison, Big Game Hunter, Furious Charge, Death Blow, getting the free attacks with the Canoness, I was able to close out a lot of games here that I would have lost with any other Warlord, obviously, because she won. But turning losing cards into an immediate utility without losing all of your cards was really very good. So getting the extra attacks here really helped and was necessary in clearing out a lot of stuff. And the Big Game Hunter and very high damage and Death Blow, these 2 were absolutely huge in taking out some of the really thorny pieces. Like I mentioned, Tau. The reason that Vahl fell short is that you'd have like a 400 hit point tank that you'd have to take down in Tau. Poison wasn't going to do it fast enough. It was going to eat through your stuff. But the combination of those 2 attackers, mobile or free attacks, and then Death Blow was very good at removing the key ones and giving you enough to close out the game. That was huge. So that Canoness trades so well against very scary Tau decks is one of the reasons she did so well. But looking at the actual ladder, how far did we get? I'm sitting at a comfortable position 82, the 82nd highest ranked player in the world at this exact moment, at the time of this recording, which is Saturday night, a couple days before the season switches over. And And that does put us comfortably in the reward stack for the top 6%. So we're sitting here looking at Skarbrand. I see you, buddy. And then in the actual ladder, I'm in the 4% bracket. Right here, comfortably in here. And there are a few players below me who are very close. These guys could easily leapfrog me. Even Tyrannus could leapfrog me and then possibly bump me to the 6%. But then there's just a massive trophy drop off before you get into the top 10%. So I'm fairly confident that I will get Skarbrand here. We'll see. And then there's just a huge drop off too. So there are a fair number of players that may still be playing right now, but I'm willing to bet that these guys are the ones who really powered through it. And then I believe this is just a snapshot, and there are more players in this trophy range than are actually showing here, which makes it even more comfortable of a sitting point too. And then looking up into, if I wanted to get to the top 30, I would need to get 15.6-ish thousand trophies. So I'm 1,100 trophies short, which is totally doable, but is pushing it, especially with the amount of time I invested to get this far. So that would be hard. And then getting up to the number 1, I would almost have to double my trophy count, which is just bananas. And even the top 2, they're both kind of in that range. And then there's a drop off, but still huge trophy count. So we're talking about tons of hours played with really powerful decks with very high win rates. So what I did of switching to 7 factions would not work for this kind of time investment. And the amount of time I spent losing really cost me about productive time. So they probably have toned in what very powerful decks they have. They know what they're doing with them, and they just run them right up the ladder. Or just did what I did this season, and it worked better for them. But yeah, there we are, and that's it. We'll keep it there. Stay tuned. I'll let you know if I actually pull it off, but I feel good. We'll see. Cheers. And for our final update, I'm recording this little bit just a couple days after the last video where the season is now over. We're officially into the Death Company? Yeah, the Death Company season of the Blood Angel season, Death Company season of the game. We've ended the last ladder season, and I'll get to an update on whether or not it worked in just a minute. But I just wanted to talk briefly that I spent a lot of time talking about strategies of this game, talking about bodyguards, talking about what's good, what's not, talking about the warlords, and kind of talking through the ideal ways or really good ways to kind of get the best out of your collection, how to ladder competitively, what kind of trait level you need to get to a certain level, the best strategies to play to get up there. And it's really satisfying to be able to play through that and see things work. So see the things that I talk about all the time actually work, just to confirm that I'm not completely off base, and just to kind of talk through it, share the thought process, and also share some evidence that it works and how it works, because gotta walk the walk, right? So the big burning question is, did it work? And as you can see, yes, it did. I'm now the proud owner of a level 1 Skarbrand, the exiled one. So I'm going to really enjoy this guy in max level campaigns. Get to bust out my old favorite Skull Taker and have him be an actual scary contender in some of these PvP matches. Yeah, and then hopefully level him up a bit from drops and get him up to a decent point, because he's got a really cool combinative traits of that Berserk, of that Inspiring Presence, Legendary, so you can max both, having very, very pure and simple focus of just being like, I hit stuff really hard, and just being a cool visual model, but also just being kind of a symbol of the hard work put in to get him. I really like that I earned this guy by doing the aggressive ladder, and at a point where, truth be told, based on my card level, I had no business getting as high as I did, as successfully as I did, unless I used the strategies I talked about to get there. So yeah, so this is the second time I've ever gotten in the top 6%. I believe the first time was for Bjorn the Fell-Handed, which I really wanted. I do feel like I played more games this time. I think that last time I was higher risk, where I played with the more successful decks for longer and didn't spend as much time building up other stuff to kind of test the leapfrogging. Because like I said in this last run, I built up, I think, all but 2 of the factions, which is a crazy amount of play time. But yeah, so it worked out really well. I'm very proud, and yeah, if I can Skarbrand, you can too. So hopefully this series was fun. I really enjoyed doing this breakdown, start to finish, just showing like the thought process and building and play of the entire way through. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and enshrine this in a playlist and call it a day. Anyway, if you've been with me through the whole journey, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate it, and I hope this was fun. Until next time, cheers.